In a Reddit Ask Me Anything session on Thursday, Stephen Hawking made some fascinating comments about the future of technology and what we should really fear. He said, quote, "If machines produce everything we need, the outcome will depend on how things are distributed. Everyone can enjoy a life of luxurious leisure if the machine-produced wealth is shared, or most people can end up miserably poor if the machine owners successfully lobby against wealth redistribution. So far, the trend seems to be the second option, with technology driving ever-increasing inequality." Yeah, so he rips capitalism here. He actually,
No, he doesn't. Capitalism is when you are able to invest your capital and get a return on it. Your capital is X, your return on it is Y. When Y is greater than 1, that is capitalism, more or less. There's different types of capital, there's unfettered capitalism where Y is unbounded. Y is just as big as you can get it, no matter what the consequences to other people, or to the planet, for that matter, or to the universe. And fettered capitalism is when people get together as a society and they decide, well, Y shouldn't be more than 10 because that's kind of not fair. We all kind of have to share all the resources we have going around. So no matter how awesome you are in investing your capital X, you should only be able to get so much return for it because of lots of reasons. Because of wealth distribution. Da da da. So being pro distributing wealth doesn't mean you're anti-capitalism unless you are pro getting Y down to 1, right thereabouts. Because then you remove the motivation for capitalism, and the reason capitalism is so awesome is because it motivates people to be entrepreneurs and to take their capital and think of ways they can invest it so they can get Y to be as big as possible. So what Stephen Hawking is saying is that we should take all this wealth created by all this automation that's coming about and spread it evenly so that Y doesn't approach infinity. And just keep Y at a reasonable level. Whereas this guy is saying that, just because Stephen Hawking is saying that he doesn't think that Y should be boundless, that means that he's anti-capitalism. But to be anti-capitalism is retarded because capitalism is a great way of motivating people to invest their wealth wisely, because people want to multiply their capital, their wealth, X, by something, Y, which is greater than 1. But this guy just doesn't seem to get
it. I think goes on to literally bring up the term capitalism and to,
Oh, does he? Does he?
Rail against it in one way or another, as he's kind of doing right here. And that's a great point that honestly I never really thought about it in this way before, the way that he's describing it. So not that long ago, we discussed an article that was in Alternet where they're talking about how the U.S. almost got a 30-hour work week once. It's incredible. In fact, the bill, I think.
Again, this is totally irrelevant to capitalism. You could work 5 hours a week and you could totally be a capitalist again, as long as you are pro Y being more than 1. You can work 1 hour a year, and as long as everybody is down with Y being more than 1, you're all capitalists. You might not be the most workaholic-ish capitalists in the history of the universe, but you're still capitalists. Yeah.
It passed the House of Representatives, but it died in the Senate. It was around the same time they were doing the New Deal, and we dropped that and obviously did different programs instead and did different legislation instead. But in the article, they bring up how William Howard Taft, of all people, a Republican, wrote an op-ed in the New York Times or had a quote that was in the...
Again, just because you don't want to work people to death or an exorbitant amount of hours does not make you more or less of a capitalist whatsoever. Doesn't. Being a humanist, which I think like having people not be mandated to work too many hours makes you kind of more of a humanist than somebody who wants people to work endless hours. So being a humanist in no way whatsoever is mutually exclusive with being a capitalist. A capitalist is just somebody who doesn't want the state to control the capital and decide what is done with everything. He wants private citizens to decide what they do with their capital and to be motivated by being able to take that capital and multiply it by Y and have that capital return to them instead of the state controlling capital and investing it as the state sees fit.
New York Times, and I think it was 1910, and he said every worker should get 3 months off, guaranteed.
Again, not anti-capitalist.
Every worker. Now, you and I hear that, and we're like, what the fuck? I mean, today, if you were to propose something like that, you'd be labeled a communist, and you'd be
only by people who don't know what they're talking about.
Dismissed as a coup. Back then, it was a Republican who said that. All right, that's stunning. But his point was, no, we're getting to a point in history where we have the technology, we have the machinery, we have the industries, already in existence, and they already know what they're doing. So why wouldn't we depend on the technology, the machinery, and the rest of us can enjoy our lives and do essentially whatever we want to do and not make the chase of the almighty dollar be our main focus. That was an argument from William Howard Taft, a Republican from back then. Again, today you can't make that argument and be a liberal without people dismissing you as some sort of kook. Now here we have one of the smartest people that ever lived basically saying the same thing or something very similar, where he's saying, no, this idea that you have to get up, you have to go to work, you have to go through the motions, you have to live in this economic system where our main function is basically being like a machine, basically being property of our owner. Scrap all of that. We don't need that. We can imagine and envision a radically different world where we have the technology. So now it's just a matter of what do we do with the wealth that we're creating through the technology. And he's saying, if we have the technology and we don't do redistribution of wealth, that's just dangerous. When you make income inequality worse, but you have the machinery to make us all rich, well, then you're just being a prick. You're just being a greedy bastard who's trying to, in essence, keep down the rest of the population and tell them that even though we have the technology to do the work for us, we're going to make you do some work along with the machinery and pay you not that much. And then you're going to struggle and we're going to take all the material wealth because, hey, capitalism.
Again, he threw capitalism up there in air quotes, and he is throwing out that, of course, at some point, Stephen Hawking said something about capitalism, and therefore this non-quote that I don't have right now is proof of my theory that what Stephen Hawking said was anti-capitalism when it wasn't at all, and all this other stuff that he said in the last couple of minutes isn't what he's saying, what he's trying to say is anti-capitalist, but what Stephen Hawking said and all of the stuff that follows from that is not anti-capitalist. Distributing wealth doesn't mean you have to get rid of capitalism. It just means that you're bounding Y. You're controlling Y. If somebody takes their capital X, invests it, and creates 100 times X through that investment in their ideas, and the government says, let's say in the future through huge automation, because that X is able to be multiplied by 100, the government steps in and says, hey, we're taking 60X, so you're left over with 40X. Still capitalism. You're getting taxed 60%, but you're still getting a big chunk back. And in the future, if people are able to take their capital and multiply it by 100 and X is already going to be pretty generous because there's so much freaking wealth around. The government takes 60X and distributes it among the people. That's still capitalism, and that's still distribution of wealth. And that is what Stephen Hawking is talking about. He's not talking about what this guy is talking about, Mr. Secular Talk, where he's saying that because Stephen Hawking is pro Y being bounded, is pro people not being able to just take a boundless amount of multiplication of their capital and keep it all for themselves, then that in some way is Stephen Hawking talking out against capitalism. But Stephen Hawking wouldn't do that because he realizes that capitalism is awesome because it motivates people to come up with promotes ingenuity for people to come up with ways to multiply X.
This is how it works. Oh, you're against it? Oh, are you, what are you, a terrorist? But again, one of the smartest guys in the world is laying this out, and it makes perfect
No, he isn't.
Makes sense. And again, I never thought of it in this way. See,
yeah, you did. Confirmation bias.
Somebody who's advocated in the past for a 4-day work week, for example, and
Again, you can work as little as you want and still be a capitalist.
I'm a social democrat, or I'm more in that camp, which means I don't want to scrap capitalism completely. I believe in a hybrid system of socialism and capitalism, kind of like Scandinavia and
just like Stephen Hawking,
a lot of the governments over there. But what he's introducing me to here is, well, what if I were to tell you that we're guaranteed to do wealth creation through technology, and then it's just a matter of how we allocate the resources and what we do with that wealth creation? Why can't we have a system where everybody's guaranteed X amount of money because your machine does X amount of work automatically, so you get X amount of wealth, and then everybody can have a life of leisure or whatever? It's a radically different world, and it's hard to wrap your mind around it because our current context is so different. But it's a fascinating thought, and when
the current context, at least from what the paradigm that he's speaking, which is the U.S., which is that there aren't very many safety nets within a capitalist structure, and that is not. And what Stephen Hawking is talking about is there being a basic income, which is what he's alluding to. There being these safety nets, that there's going to be so much wealth left over that we can have a baseline of living for everybody, which is totally doable considering the coming of AI and automation and this rampant increase in technology. But that doesn't mean that you have to be anti-capitalist.
One of the smartest guys ever is saying, yeah, capitalism is the problem.
No, he's not. He's not.
The problem is the way that we distribute the wealth, even though we can.
Okay, that's what he's saying. But just the way you distribute wealth is not. Distributing the wealth in a somewhat sane manner is not anti-capitalism. They're two different things.
And do it better, and we choose not to. When he's saying it, well, then that gives me pause and makes me say, shit, we gotta sit down and figure all this out, man. How are we gonna move forward from here? Because it does appear like,
yeah, not by removing the motivation for people to be productive and creative. That's not the way.
With the technology we have and that we're going to have, we can't have a system that's reliant upon exploitation for that much longer. We have the ability to vastly improve the system and the way it works, but it requires people in power knowing that they can no longer rip us the fuck off, and it requires organization in figuring out exactly how we're going to work it out from here.
Whatever, dude.